I got caught grinding on a stranger at a wedding. He left me at the venue. I know everything is not black and white, and I need a little bit of context here. I'm 26, my boyfriend is 28. So every Friday evening, my boyfriend would just grab his keys, say he was going out, and disappear until late at night. He didn't give me any explanation. No, I'll be with so-and-so. Nothing. He would just go out. And I used to sit there wondering where the hell he went every single week, but I never pushed too hard because I didn't want to seem clingy or controlling. And at first, I never thought much of it. I figured maybe it was a guy's night thing, or he probably just needed space after work. But after a few weeks, I started noticing the pattern. It was too obvious to ignore. Every single Friday, the same time, the same routine. Sometimes he didn't even bother coming home until the next morning. He didn't even text or call. He just went into complete radio silence. I can't even explain how much it messed with my head. I'd sit there all night, staring at my phone, waiting for a single, "Hey, I'm okay," that never came. Or I'd be out with my friends. I'd imagine 100 different scenarios, but my mind always went to the worst one. He had to be seeing someone else. There was no way that didn't look like cheating. I was so sure of it, but I had no evidence. After weeks of driving myself crazy with that thought and getting nothing from him, I just snapped. I convinced myself if he could do it to me, I could do it right back. So when he went out, I started going out too. At first, it was out of pure spite. I'd get dressed up, call a friend or two, and head to a club or a party, and most times, imagining what it would feel like if I walked in and caught my boyfriend doing something shady. I pictured the look on his face when he sees me standing there in my heels and calling him out in front of everyone. But it never happened, not even once. I never ran into him, and I never caught him in the act. And slowly, the reason I was going out started to change. It stopped being about him and started being about me. I liked everything about being outside. I enjoyed every moment of it. The way it felt to dress up, to have music blasting around me, to laugh with friends, and to dance until my legs hurt. I felt free because I wasn't just sitting at home waiting for scraps of his attention. So I wasn't just doing it out of revenge anymore. I genuinely started loving those nights out. During my little escapades, I started discovering sides of myself I never even knew existed. I learned things about my body I didn't think I could do. Nights out weren't just about dancing anymore. They were like a crash course in confidence. I learned how to move my waist in ways I'd never managed before, how to twerk without looking awkward, how to grind on someone without overthinking it, and even how to ride properly. You know, cowgirl and reverse cowgirl. The kind of stuff I used to be too shy or clueless to try. I remember one night in particular when someone hyped me up on the dance floor and showed me how to roll my hips. It felt liberating, like unlocking a part of me that had been asleep for years. And it hit me hard because I remembered back during my boyfriend's birthday in our first year together, when one of our friends dared me to grind on him. I froze. I laughed it off, made a joke about not knowing how to do that kind of thing, but truthfully I didn't. I felt embarrassed, like I was missing something every other girl seemed to just know. Now, years later, there I was in a packed club, finally figuring it out, and finally knowing exactly what to do and how to make it look good. Anyways, one evening I ran out of patience. I didn't go clubbing or partying that night. I was sitting at home staring at the clock and waiting for him to pull his usual Friday night vanishing act. And something in me just said, enough. And out of pure annoyed curiosity, I decided to follow him. I waited a few minutes after he left before I grabbed my keys and tailed his car. My heart was racing the whole time, partly scared of what I might find, partly ready to finally catch him doing what I'd been imagining all this time. Except, what I found wasn't even close. I parked a little down the street and watched him walk into this small, kind of dorky-looking building with posters of superheroes in the window. I gave it a few minutes before I crept closer and peeked inside, and there he was. Sitting in a circle with a bunch of other nerdy people of different ages, men and women, holding comic books. They weren't flirting. They weren't doing anything shady. They were just reading, laughing, and debating over some superhero plot like their lives depended on it. I just stood there frozen and disappointed. I wanted to feel relieved, like, oh, thank God he's not cheating. But what I actually felt was this sinking, gut-punching disappointment. Because here's the thing. I had already crossed the line so many times by now, grinding on strangers, doing things I'd never even done with him, and letting my anger push me way past where I ever thought I'd go. And now I couldn't undo it. I couldn't just stop and pretend none of it happened. Watching him in there, completely innocent, made me feel like the villain in my own story. One morning, I was rushing like crazy to get to work. I had overslept and was throwing stuff into my bag last minute, barely even thinking. As I was heading out, my bag slipped off my shoulder, hit the floor, and everything inside just spilled everywhere. Lip gloss, receipts, random junk, and then a couple of condom packs slid right out in plain view. Before I could scoop them up, my boyfriend was already kneeling down to help me pack my things. He froze when he saw them, then he held one up and asked, "Why do you have so many condoms?" My heart stopped. I could feel my face heat up instantly, but I forced a laugh and blurted out the first thing that came to mind. I told him some group had been doing a sensitization program on STDs and family planning near my office, and they were practically shoving these condoms into everyone's hands, like you couldn't walk away without a bag full. I made it sound like a joke, like it was just some weird office thing that happened to me. Inside, though, I was panicking, because that was a lie, a full, bold-faced lie. Those condoms were mine, bought for my nights out, and watching him nod and half smile at my stupid excuse made my stomach twist in knots. Anyways, that was just one out of a few close calls where I almost got caught. There were other moments too, texts I barely deleted in time, and nights I came home smelling like someone else's cologne, but nothing ever blew up completely. The real breaking point, though, was at a friend's wedding. Everything was going fine at first. Ceremony, pictures, dinner, all the usual stuff. But then the reception started, and the DJ decided to turn the whole place into a full-on club. Bass thumping, lights flashing, and everyone screaming the lyrics to every song. And I don't know what came over me. Maybe it was the alcohol, or probably it was the months of me living like this on the weekends. But the second that music hit, my body just switched into that outside mode. I wasn't at a wedding anymore. I felt like I was back in the club. I let loose, started moving and dancing, just completely losing myself to it like I'd been doing every Friday night for months. My boyfriend danced with me for a little while, but he's not a big dancer, so after a couple of songs, he tapped out and went to sit down. I stayed on the floor, completely in my element. The music was loud, the crowd was hyped, and I just let myself go. Then this one guy came up behind me, and we started dancing. It got heated fast. I was grinding on him so hard I could feel his hands hovering like he didn't know what to do with himself. At one point, I even pulled a chair over, sat him down, and went full twerk mode on him, so much that I could feel how much he was enjoying it, if you know what I mean. I caught a glimpse of my boyfriend from across the room. His face was frozen, with his eyes wide, like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Before I could even process it, he stood up and walked out. I thought maybe he was just going to grab a drink or use the bathroom, so I kept dancing, didn't think much of it. But the whole night went by, and he never came back. When everything came to an end, I called him over and over, but he wouldn't pick up. So I grabbed a ride home, figuring he'd already be there. When I walked in, my stomach dropped. He was sitting in the middle of the living room floor, with my laptop open in front of him, like he'd been waiting for me. I asked him why he'd just up and left me there without saying a word, and all he said was a flat statement about me changing my password. And yeah, I had changed my password, but the way he said it made my heart skip a beat. It was like he already knew there was something I didn't want him to see. I tried to flip it back on him, focusing on the fact that he'd left me stranded at a wedding without even texting me, but he wouldn't let it go. He just kept looking at me, calm but firm, repeating that I needed to unlock the laptop. I refused, acted mad, like I couldn't believe he was the one interrogating me after what he'd just done. I pretended to be hurt, throwing attitude and hoping he'd drop it. But inside, my stomach was in knots because I knew exactly what he was looking for and what he'd find if I slipped up. He finally snapped and accused me of cheating. Hearing him say it out loud made me lose it completely. I went off on him. I raised my voice with tears in my eyes, acting like I was the most wronged woman in the world. We argued for what felt like forever, going in circles, until I finally threw my hands up and said fine, I'd unlock the damn laptop. I wasn't even worried because I knew I'd covered my tracks. I'd been careful from day one, so there were no messages, no pictures, nothing on my devices that could give me away. So I typed in the password, sat back, and watched him search through it like a man desperate for proof that didn't exist. When he found nothing, I went on the attack. I called him unbelievable, unbearable, and accused him of being paranoid and toxic. I made it all about his lack of trust, not about what I'd been doing. And yeah, he was still mad about what happened at the wedding, about me grinding on that guy like I had no boyfriend in the room. But I didn't give him room to talk about it. I spun it so hard in my favor that by the end, it felt like I'd won. He had accused me of something obscene, something I'd just proven wasn't true, and that gave me the upper hand. That was how I felt, and that's exactly what I told myself in that moment. After hours of going back and forth with our voices raised and tears shed from my eyes, he finally cracked. His anger drained into guilt, and he started apologizing, saying he was sorry for accusing me, sorry for being so insecure. He sat on the floor in front of me, looking up like a man desperate not to lose what he thought he still had. I kept my act going, with my arms crossed and my face stone cold, making him work for it. He inched closer, pulled me into his arms, hugging me tight, whispering how he loved me and didn't want his paranoia to ruin what we had. He kept pleading, kissing my shoulder, and swearing he'd never accuse me of something like that again. I stayed stiff at first, grumbling, acting like I was still mad, but eventually I sighed and muttered that I forgave him. I let him believe he'd been the one in the wrong, let him hold me like everything was fine again. The next day rolled around, Friday, as predictable as ever, but this time it felt heavier. The whole house was quiet, both of us pretending like last night hadn't happened, as if we hadn't just dragged each other through the mud. But if I'm being sincere, I knew nothing had changed. But not really. After work that Friday, he called me on his way out. His voice was casual, saying he had somewhere to be and would be home late. I already knew what that meant, same old comic book club, same routine. I was actually not surprised he was staying out late, so I didn't even hesitate. As soon as we hung up, I changed into something tight, called a friend, and headed out to the club. The place was packed as usual, music shaking the floor, and bodies were moving everywhere. I let the energy swallow me whole and let a random guy pull me close. His hands were wandering without hesitation. My lips were locked on his, and his fingers sliding where they shouldn't have been, and his mouth trailing down my neck, sucking at my skin like he owned me. My dress was halfway slipping off my shoulder, and my mind was buzzing with alcohol and the rush of it all. And then, cutting through the music, cutting through everything, I heard his deep voice, and it sliced through me, asking if I was having fun. My stomach dropped, my whole body went cold, but my boyfriend was already sitting there, close enough to see everything I was doing, and there was no way I could cover up. My spirit almost jumped out of my body the second I heard him. My heart slammed against my ribs so hard it hurt. I turned my head slowly, praying I was imagining things. But no, he was right there. My boyfriend was sitting just a few feet away, and his eyes were locked on me. His expression was flat, but sharp enough to cut me in half. I had no clue how long he'd been there, how much he'd seen, or when he'd even come in. The guy I was with immediately let go of me, but the damage was already done. My boyfriend didn't yell at me there or try to make a scene. He didn't even look at the guy next to me. He just leaned closer, and his voice was low and cold. Then he told me not to bother coming home that night. And then he thanked me for truly letting him see my true colors before it was too late. That statement didn't even make sense to me. Then he stood up, turned his back, and walked out of the club without another word. I sat there frozen. My hands were shaking. My mind was racing. The crowd, the music, the lights, all of it faded into background noise. For the first time since this whole thing started, I didn't feel like I was in charge anymore, like I had control over everything. He'd seen everything, and now I had no idea what was waiting for me on the other side of that night. And it's not like I could spin the story this time, not like I'd always done before. Normally, I'd twist things around, make him feel guilty, and would have blamed it on his so-called comic book secrecy, and then act like he was the one shutting me out. But I couldn't because I know why he never let me in on where he was going anymore. It was my fault. I can still remember one night, early on, when he actually tried to talk to me about it. He was excited, telling me about this club he'd found, how they met every Friday to talk about comics, trade issues, and debate storylines. I barely looked up from my phone. I remember laughing and saying something like, "Ugh, that's boring nerd stuff. Just do whatever you want. I don't need to hear about it." He went quiet after that and changed the subject, and I didn't think twice about it. From then on, he just stopped trying. I never asked where he was going, he never offered, and eventually it became this unspoken gap between us. I told myself then it was shady, before realizing what his Friday night's adventures was about and that he was hiding something. But the truth was, I'd made it clear I didn't care enough to listen. And now I'm caught red-handed doing the exact thing I once accused him of in my head and acting like a victim when he once suspected me. And there was no story to spin and no clever excuse to pull out. So for a while I just sat there numb, staring at the door he'd walked out of. The guy I'd been with awkwardly mumbled something about getting a drink and disappeared, leaving me alone on the dance floor with the taste of alcohol and regret thick in my mouth. My stomach twisted with dread, but I couldn't bring myself to follow him. I was scared, and I needed to think of something that would at least make the mess look a little less messier. Although I wasn't sure I could come up with one. I stayed at the club for another hour, not because I wanted to, but because I didn't know what else to do. My hands kept shaking as I clutched my phone, staring at the screen, and hoping for a message or a call. But he didn't do any of that. There were no angry texts or calls. Eventually I left, wandering the streets like a ghost until I found a cheap motel nearby. I checked in without even thinking, locked the door behind me, and just sat on the edge of the bed, replaying the look on his face over and over. The look was worse than rage itself. Also, I could see pure disappointment in his eyes, and that look was suffocating enough that I was barely breathing when my eyes met his. By morning, I dragged myself home, unsure if he'd even be there. The house was quiet when I unlocked the door. His shoes were gone, so were some of his clothes. He didn't even bother to say goodbye or talk it through me, just the final nail in the coffin of something I'd been hammering shut for months without realizing it. And as much as I wanted to tell myself I'd only done all of this because of his Friday nights away, the truth was staring me right in the face. He never betrayed me. But I betrayed him over and over until there was nothing left to save. I should have known something was off that night. When he called to say he'd be staying out late, it should have clicked right then that he never gave me a heads up like that before. That little change in his routine was practically a warning sign, but I was too wrapped up in my own world to notice. I was so focused on my plans, on living in this double life I'd built for myself, that I ignored what was right in front of me. Now, everything's blown up, and I have no idea what's coming next. Whether he's done for good, or if there's even a sliver of a chance to make things right. So I stood there in the center of the room, not knowing what to do exactly. My hands trembled, and my throat was tight. I started screaming, crying, scattered and throwing around whatever I could find, like I was literally running mad. I became a raging mad dog, moving from room to room. All the excuses I'd told myself, all the blame I'd tried to throw on him, none of it mattered anymore. Because even without him saying a word, I knew he was done, and I knew I was the reason why. Then, I sat on the floor where he'd once waited for me with my laptop, reloading that I had gone too far, and I hadn't just lost my boyfriend. I'd destroyed my future with my own hands. Right now, I need advice on what to do. I know this is my fault, so please don't come at me with that. I just want to know if there's anything I can do to make things go back to normal. I don't care if it takes forever, as long as we can get back together and be a couple without any more issues. Update. I've been trying to process everything that happened since that night, after he told me never to return home and left. I didn't hear from him for days. It was even my luck that I got home the next day, and the locks were not changed. But not being able to communicate with him as usual was eating me alive, so I finally tried talking to a mutual friend, hoping maybe they'd tell me what was going on, or if there was still a chance to fix this. What I found out, God, that broke me harder than anything I could have imagined. My boyfriend had been planning to propose to me. He had already bought the ring. He was talking to our friends about how to make it special, planning out every detail because he really thought we had a future together. And now, all of that is gone because of what I did. I felt so bad. Our friend told me straight up that everyone knew why he called it off. They said I shouldn't have let myself go that far in front of him, that I'd humiliated him beyond repair. He wasn't just mad about me cheating. He was done because I did it so openly, like his love meant nothing to me. Now he has returned and he's kicked me out of the house. I packed what I could and left because he wanted nothing more to do with me. I don't have him anymore. I don't have the life we were building. All I have is regret eating away at me every single second of the day, knowing I can't take back what I did, and I'll never get him back. I don't even know how to live independently anymore. My life is intertwined with his, and I don't even know where to live. I'm just moving from one place to another, like I have no life of my own.